All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining us. Thanks to the viewers that will watch at home later or any that might join us this evening. Today's topic is going to be going over breaking down the hitting mechanics from stance to finish. It's going to be a little bit different than our first hitting talk that we had last weekend. We're going to have a little bit more conversation here. If we start rambling on and we're sticking on a topic, say, we really love talking about the stance for whatever reason. If that goes all 40 minutes, boom, we might have to get back together sometime later this week to finish the rest. I know I have a couple pictures. I know Stefan's got some video, and feel free when you're up to talk to show that. I'm totally cool with it. The more the merrier, I guess, so to say. So that being said, let's get started. The stance, and for me personally, I don't care what the stance looks like. I don't know what you guys believe. For me, growing up, my favorite player was Sammy Sosa, and he had one of those funky stance. The arms were really far out. I just loved it. I was playing, backyard wiffle ball with my buddies. I try to mimic it. He was my favorite. I also love doing the Gary Sheffield, where he's, yanking the bat back and forth. Now when I'm going through teaching it, I tell kids it's going to be whatever you feel most comfortable with, right? Now, if it hurts you to getting to a certain position, then I might start to change it. For the most part, though, the stance I rarely ever touch, right? So I don't know if anything you guys want to add to that, Bree.
No, I think the stance is it needs to show your personal style and depending on your body and what you're capable of doing. But you're right. I mean, the stance are usually, I think you can tweak little things here and there. And if you're trying to accomplish a goal, lowering the hands, raising the hands, little things like that, starting open, a little bit more open, starting a little bit more closed than what you had been doing if you're trying to accomplish a goal. But overall, I would say that the stance needs to represent who you are and what you're really comfortable with and how you're comfortable with standing and getting into the right positions. We'll talk about a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's to piggyback off of that. That's absolutely on point. We over here believe at the same thing. Allowing our hitters the freedom to choose their stance. It shows originality. And with that comes confidence. And that's at the end of the day what we want our guys to have going into the box is confidence. That's going to translate it into having more chance, a better chance to compete at the box. And if we as coaches, that's when we identify a mistake, and we need to call that specific hitter into the office and break it down to them. And communicate with them, this is what we think you need to change in your stance because it's going to help you with this part or this part, then we do so. But I think, stance, originality and style and freedom, it's all, it all breeds confidence. And that's the most important thing when you go into the box.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I think like for stance, if you look at video of a lot of big leaguers when they were kids,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of their stances look exactly the same. They don't really change much. I think it's mostly just the natural way that they move, and they just the way they are. So some guys, I mean, they might try to tinker with their stance, or they might try to do different things, but I think it's always gonna progress back towards the mean, back towards where they started at when they were 10 years old and hitting dingers in the backyard.
Sure.
So it's mostly style, I feel like, for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna I have a couple pictures here of my favorite stances. Can you guys see those?
Yeah.
Julio.
The Julio Franco, with the bat tip over his head. Bad,
Classic.
Really wide. I don't know how he did it. That was probably one of the most uncomfortable ones for me to kind of feel out. And then, new guy, Cody Bellinger, where you're starting to see a lot of guys stand straight up. It's just kind of natural. It's comfortable. Anything you guys want to mention about these three or somebody else, a stance that you go back to when you're first teaching, baseball or something?
Yeah, man, I think Julio Franco and what's his name, Gary Sheffield. I think those were the two that I did the most. I mean, both of them played for the Braves. Anybody knows me. I mean, I grew up. I still am like a huge Braves fan. But those are like Franco pointing the bat, like pointing the barrel at the pitcher, and then Sheffield with the waggle. Uh, and in just those three pictures, you can tell that they're all doing obviously something different.
Yeah.
But the key part of the stance is at a certain point they get to the very similar positions, no matter how they start. So if it's wide, if they're tall, but generally at contact, they're about the same. So that's why, what we're all saying, the stance really isn't that important.
Yeah. I think it's important in the sense that it needs to allow you to get to a good hitting position.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. If a guy has his hands really low, and when he steps, he can't get them back to a good position to launch from, then we need to move them, right? We probably should start a little bit higher.
Yeah.
When I'm working, heck, I got a couple lessons that are even 5 and 6 year olds. I'm never even held a bat before, and then we just get kind of back to the basics of holding your hands pretty much from right where you're going to launch from, right?
Yeah,
and
correct.
Even the older guys, if you're struggling, let's just get back to making hitting simple again and just starting in a good spot to hit in our stance. Now, I don't want to take the timing and rhythm away where I don't want no trophy guys where they just stand there and they're stiff, but we get a little bit of, moving and some wiggle there.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing with that little detail in the stance is the head. Your head might be covering, you're only getting a certain percentage of vision in the pitcher. So it maybe opening up a little bit allows you to pick up pitches, more consistently. So a little detail like that in the stance might be important to a certain hitter.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. I know a lot of people don't like the closed stance because they say it takes your vision off, right? It takes both eyes off of the pitcher. I don't know how much of that is true. A lot of people claim that if you open up, you get both eyes on the pitcher, full face there, and you have better vision. I've heard that before from some coaches that if you're open, you have better eyesight, right?
Yeah.
So, from the stance, I always say, I've moved away from a negative move. I always say step. Now, some people step and, they need to get some momentum to get to their step. You guys may mention negative move. That's totally fine. I kind of stick with stepping. For me, everybody steps a different way, and that's totally fine. Again, as long as it gets them to a good hitting position, a good launch position. I tell the young kids, I call it attack position because I want it to be an aggressive term. I want them to feel aggressive from that position. So the step, it's however, how athletic they are, right? For me, I was a leg kick guy. I couldn't just step forward. I couldn't just pick my foot up and move it.
Like Pedroia.
My legs. Yeah, I had like kind of a Pedroia point. I had to get my leg up because I felt like that got me into my legs. A couple pictures here that I have of some different steps. We got the Josh Donaldson, who's really extreme, who gets really far up there. From Mookie, he's changed a little bit over the course of his career. For now, it's more literally just picking his foot up and stepping forward. And then Chris Bryant, I like to talk about, he pretty much just picks up his toes and puts it straight back down. And I think that all is going to depend too, based off of their stance.
Yeah.
Right? Chris Bryant's probably not going to be able to do a leg kick from where he starts, right? Again, Cody Bellinger he has a little wiggle room. He can do a bunch of different things. He just takes a long stride. Anything you guys would like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, the stance definitely dictates what you can do with your feet. But you said, like, Bellinger couldn't really just pick up and put back down.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm not extremely familiar with how close his feet are together, but if you got somebody who's standing tall with his feet close together, they're not really going to stand up or just pick his foot up and put it back down. So just like you said, Chris Bryant would struggle with a huge leg kick. I mean, it goes the same both ways. But the mechanics of it, I think, with the feet firm in the ground, applying some pressure, but with the positive and negative moves like what you're talking about, I think it's pretty individual. I wouldn't necessarily take away somebody's negative move if they were succeeding.
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, the more you look at it, there's a lot of really, really good hitters that once you break it down on video, they're not moving backwards. Like if I'm right, they're not moving backwards towards the catcher, especially with their head. I think the one that just jumps out to me the most is Barry Bonds, and I didn't really uh, dig into him for a while until I got older, but it always seemed from like the TV view that he was like loading and then exploding.
Yeah.
But once you break it down on video, I mean, his head doesn't really go back at all through the whole entire swing. It's like, and it looks like, but his hands go back a little bit and he sort of coils.
Yeah.
But that negative move never really happens. If there's a negative move, it's really like top down, like in terms of positive would be getting higher, negative would be getting lower. So he does like a little crunch with his whole body, and that's his negative move. And the other thing, sort of with the stride or the step or like what you were talking about, is the timing of it is crucial. And the biggest thing that I tell our guys is you want to be, whatever your step or whatever it is, you want to be at the very top of it at release. So if you're a leg kick guy, you want to be at the very top of your leg kick at release, ready to move back to the ground. If you're a toe tap guy, then you want to be a toe touching the ground at release. If you're just a heel lift guy like Pujols or somebody like that, then you want that heel to be up at release, and then everything can go towards contact from there, the timing of it at least.
Yeah. I like that whole the north to south rather than moving the head, west to east type thing.
Yeah.
We try to minimize our head movement as much as possible so the ball's not moving on us, right? We try to keep it as still as possible. Whenever we're moving, we try to keep that head as still as possible. It's probably not going to happen. It's not going to just stay in that same spot, but that's what we're trying to do, right? That's our goal.
Yeah, I definitely agree with both of you guys. I think, negative movement is not really a thing unless you create it. But we tell our guys here, as long as you have, three things, and it goes with both things that you guys said, a quiet head, quiet body, and then obviously quick hands. Those three things, you're simplifying the tuning of those three things. If you can do those three things with whatever movement you have as an individual, then that's fine with us. Because like we talked about, obviously we're gonna get to that launch position, we're gonna get to that strong base, and then from there we go. But the negative movement, I don't really like it either. As long as you have a stride or a step that's gonna allow you to get to that power slot, to that launch position, with a good base. Both feet on the ground, and then you go from there.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm anti-negative movement. I feel like it creates some problems with a lot of guys getting stuck back there or getting jumpy forward. But there are definitely really, really good hitters who have a pretty pronounced negative move. I got Chipper Jones queued up, and he had one, and I probably couldn't do it, but he could. He's obviously a better hitter than anybody here. But so I'm not anti-negative move. I think it all of these things really, and pretty much my philosophy is pretty individualized. So it could come down to whether you can do it personally or not.
Correct. But I agree with that.
Yeah. That's I agree with that. A lot of it's gonna be dictated by the way that guys move, and the amount of mobility they have, the amount of stability they have. So if a guy's really tight, he might just be really stiff and just move straight forward. If a guy's more like rhythmic and he tries to get a little bit more out of his load, maybe like a leg kick guy, you might see more of a negative move. I think if you look at video, most guys have somewhat of a negative move, but it's more so just them getting into their hinge, into the back hip, basically back hip, back up, back inside of back foot, whatever you want to call it. So I think that's like their negative move, is getting into that position so they can engage the ground. So I think that's actually pretty important. Some guys might feel it as a negative move, and it might not even be a negative move. Some guys might think that they're not doing a negative move, but they are a little bit. Some guys might have excessive negative move. So it's just gonna depend on the hitter and the way that that's most optimal for them to get their best swing off.
What do you mean when you say engage the ground?
So like when they get into their hinge, into their back hip, you know, that's how you get that energy stored into the ground. So you get your weight into the back, you know, the inside part of your back foot, and then you go into your forward move to get into launch position. So that it's kind of just like a progression, you know, it's a movement of energy up the chain, you know, from your legs up to the end when you get your swing off to the ball.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And you know, again, the step leads to, and we all had, I think, different terms for it: launch position, hitting position, again, attack position, whatever you want to call it. For me, this is the most important thing. I don't know about you guys, but getting to this position is all that matters, right? You know, whatever led up to getting to this position really doesn't matter. If we can get to this position, I think it cleans a lot of things up moving forward, right? So my attack position, my launch position, you know, I want a little bend in the knees. I want to have a good base. I think if we're too close, you know, you're just kind of creating a spin. If we get too wide, it gets really hard to turn. So, you know, again, getting in our legs, bending our knees a little bit. I like looking at our chest over home plate. And it might be different for each guy just based off of, you know, comfort. Some guys might be a little bit more upright. Some might even, like the Sammy Sosa, where he's really far bent over and has like a huge, you know, spine angle degree or whatever you want to call it. I also, in that position, I like to see our bat head sort of over our head with our knob facing the catcher. So it creates a good, clean bat path. You know, again, for me, shoulders, I like to see just tilted in a little bit. I don't like them still straight when we get to that position. I feel like a little turn. I almost tell guys, your front shoulder almost wants to point at where you want to make contact is kind of the cue that I'll use. Anything else you guys would like to add to the launch position, attack position?
Let's see. Launch position, like what you were sort of talking about with your legs, with your legs bent and everything like that. So as long as you're athletic, I guess is the right term, like athletic and ready to move. No, it's not. I don't really call it a launch position as much, just because I don't want them to get stuck in like a freeze frame.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like foot down, hold, and then swing from there. I would much rather than move through that position, like build up some energy through that position and then ready to go. But I know what you mean. Like I don't use that term very much.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if you use whenever I've used it excessively, I feel like a guy would just become like 2-part swing.
Sure.
It'll just be like load, stride, see the baseball,
Have
swing.
a pause there.
Yeah.
You call it like toe, I know some people call it like toe touch position. So how do you communicate that with your players? That position to get to, you know, with their hands back.
It's more of like just sort of walking them through like the movements that we want.
Okay.
And then the timing of it and the mindset behind it. Instead of like get here, where you want to say, okay, our hands need to do this, or start thinking of something external that gets them to that position, whatever it might be. Like point your knob at the catcher, whatever. Like it could be something different for different hitters. But it could. I just run into trouble normally whenever I use picture, like whenever I'm trying to actually coach the person. Now, the pictures are useful for sure to see the different like parts of the swing, but it's sort of the same concept of just only watching slow motion video, and you sort of lose concept in your head and in your eyes of how fast you're actually moving through the swing. If you're only watching slow motion, then you sort of, okay, everything slows down on you almost. Because I've done it as a coach and a player, both of those things. I've turned it into a 2-part hitter. I've turned other people into 2-part hitters, and I've slowed them down and sped them up too much. But hey, we're figuring it out as we go.
Yeah, sure. What about you guys, Jose?
No, yeah, I use the term launch position, or slot position, or fire position. We use that. Exactly this year, we started using that term a lot, just because a lot of our guys they didn't know what was that. They just had no idea. But that's when we started implementing it this year a lot. We used it a lot. But two things that come into mind when we get we want our guys over here to, be in a good balanced position, and both feet on the ground. And I think we run into a lot of trouble with that both feet on the ground thing. At least for me personally, I've had the issue with a lot of my hitters that their back foot, their back heel from their back foot is off the ground.
Yeah, we do the exact same thing.
when they're landing,
Yeah.
and it's like,
their back heel.
Their back heels off the ground. Wait, so they step, their front foot lands and their back heel's already.
Yes.
That's the first thing that comes off, and it's like really drastic. And that's telling me, obviously, they're anxious, they're mentally anxious, they're trying to go get the baseball. And those things are going to cause obviously less power, less inconsistency with the barrel. Your body's going to move and then your head moves. So that's one of the challenges that I've had, we've had over here, of trying to control that and eliminate it. But obviously we want our guys in a good posture. And I think, Tyler, you mentioned it, the chest over the home plate. Yeah. I really like that. And then obviously the nod to the catcher. One of our best hitters here, that came through here, that was his thing, nod to the catcher. And that stuck with me a few years ago. And we've tried to implement it here in the past year. So that's huge for us. But launch position, as long as you're in a position, athletically, to be ready to fire to the point of contact, and have a consistent hand path to the baseball, I think you should be fine.
Yeah, and Jose, to kind of bounce off that whole, the chest over home plate, it's a stronger position, right? Anyone that's standing straight up, easy to push them over. You look at, football or basketball. If you're trying to tackle someone, you want your chest leaning forward. Basketball, when you're guarding someone, chest forward. I also believe, it gets your head a little bit closer to the zone, so it gives you a little bit better vision for the whole zone. I think guys that are more upright, they struggle with the low pitch because their head's so far away from it, right? So that's two benefits I always mention to guys if you can get your chest over home plate a little bit, those are two advantages I think that you'll see.
For sure. No doubt about it.
So obviously you were talking about some guys are more upright, and it's sort of more common now.
Yeah.
Especially at the higher levels. But we've got a couple guys that were upright, and we wanted them to get to that more of a hip hinge, like what Adon was talking about, the different position, the chest over the plate. We wanted them to get more like that so they could get those benefits, but they were starting straight up top. Or upright. So the biggest thing for us was trying to get them into that position at the same time as the top of their load. So it, like leg kick, toe tap, whatever it is. That way they're not moving down, because we had a guy, a right-handed hitter, he would get to those positions, but he would be moving to that position at contact
as he's swinging.
Way too late. Necessarily.
Like the foot lands, you need to be in that position already. When front foot lands, your chest needs to be, and that, the spine angle, and then it keeps the spine angle from there.
Yeah. Well, the other issue that we've had with that is we've had guys, so I'll go sideways.
Yeah.
So if they're preset here.
Yeah.
If I'm a lefty, preset here, and then instead of bending, turn it into side bend to cover the plate, it just stays that, and it just gets them steep, and everything's like this.
Sure.
Across the zone and steep. So I think a big part of the hip hinge and the posture and everything is translating that to contact. So it's not forward and steep. It's more of a side bend, get behind the baseball sort of thought process.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. All those things. You definitely want, if you're looking at a still frame or things like that, you definitely want to make sure the posture is good. I think one thing is just to have a posture either tailored to the player's approach or tailor to somewhere where they could cover every kind of pitch. I know this is something I wish I knew when I was playing, the posture thing, because one of the pitches that used to give me trouble was a high pitch.
Yep.
I think if I ever struck out, it was on a high fastball, and there were strikes. You know, we'll get them called all the time. And I look back, and I think I was too bent over. I had too much forward bend.
Yep.
You know, so if I wish that I would have known that, you know, have more of like an adjustable posture instead of being like here with my forward bend, being more here,
Yep.
being a little bit more upright. And then there's other guys that, you know, instead of being here, they're like that. So then they can't cover the outside hat.
Yeah.
They can't cover
Now,
different pitches.
When you got those high pitches, did you feel like you kind of came up to get them?
Yeah. So one of my biggest problems was I had early hip extension. That was like, I think looking back at video of when I was hitting, it was all early hip extension. I see it now with a lot of our guys. The ones that struggle with a high pitch, they have, you know, they have forward bend when they get to that launch position. Another thing, like you could also, that I like to see off maybe just looking at a still frame or maybe like slow-mo video, it's like their front knee being flexed. That way they could adjust, you know, they could adjust, they could sink down into it. If it's a breaking ball, they could just straighten it right up when it's a fastball. There's some guys, and again, a lot of it depends on their mobility, but there's some guys that they land with like a super straight leg, you know, they get that stiff leg, and then all they can hit is fastballs. You throw them a breaking ball, and they can't adjust. They have no method to adjust from it.
Sure.
So one more thing. Sorry, I'm kind of going on right here. But,
Keep it coming, Don.
Yeah.
One more thing is like, so this is all good to know as coaches, but we also have to respect that it's a movement. You know, so you want to look at the launch position as a whole. So how does the stride and the load, how does it turn into the launch position? You know, so like, are they sequencing right? Is their pelvis going into rotation like right before? If you look at video of a lot of big leaguers, their hips, their pelvis hips, or you're gonna call it, it starts rotation right before they start their actual swing. So like when they're landing, it starts like slightly before. It's not a lot. It's slight. We have the privilege. We use K-Vest a lot with the Phillies, so we can tie that video into how they're sequencing. A lot of times, if you look on video and they're not going into their pelvis isn't rotating when it goes into heel strike, then their sequence is usually off. You know, that's when you get the pushy guys or the guys that are, like Stefan said, they move their pelvis and their torso together. I don't think necessarily that's something that the players want to know. I know personally, like as a hitter, I don't want to think a lot like hips before my, you know, pelvis before torso. I don't want to think like that.
Yeah.
I have thought that in the past and it wasn't good. But I think it's something good for us to know.
Yeah.
So we can maybe cue them up a little bit or maybe try different drills with them.
Have
you
you
don't see that?
Have you had anybody where you've given them a cue that works? Because I mean, obviously I coached you for, what was it, 3 years and 2 or 3 years, and it gets into that position, like everybody sees it on video and everybody knows that like the hips or the pelvis go first, and then the shoulder, like the kinetic change. You can't really argue against it. I think the biggest question really is how do you get them to do it right?
How to translate it.
Yeah. So like, I know we've got a first baseman, and Adon knows who I'm talking about. He's got unbelievable pop, and he does it right. So his hips go first, but they go like way first, and they go like really far. So like there's that guy, and then there's a guy who doesn't go at all.
One thing I've seen too is guys that are swinging before that front foot lands, like they're starting to move their hands as they're like stepping, right? Their hands have to go before their hips. Their front foot hasn't landed. They haven't got to that position. So you see really push movement, right? So I think one big thing is making sure the front foot lands first, and then it allows for everything to, you know, hopefully sequence up, right? It gives you a better chance. But I think a lot, you know, a lot of guys have that issue. If they're trying to swing before they land, you know.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, I definitely
start to go.
that's gonna cause timing problems and all sorts of
Absolutely.
problems. That's what I'm saying. It's good for us to know
Yeah.
as coaches, but when it comes to the player, it's gonna be more on their feel and how they feel they can make contact the best, and then we can kind of guide them. One thing that I've seen that kind of helps with that stuff with the sequencing, the offset in drill, like when you
Yeah.
kind of face like towards first base, kind of working
Yeah,
on
like the
throwing
opposite
a pitch.
infielder.
Yeah. I think that's kind of helped with the sequencing of the hips, at least with that part, without
Yeah.
dumping everything and just having everything lag behind. I think that could help out getting pretty clean.
Have any of you guys
Turn off.
used, like, and we're starting to get into that next, the next question is the swing and starting the swing. Have you guys ever talked about swinging with your back hip, and using your back hip to swing? That's one cue I thought of, Stefan, when you started talking about it, was swinging with your back hip and turning to hit rather than using your hands and pushing to hit.
Yeah. Back hip's huge. Obviously, we talk about it a lot, trying to get loaded into the back hip and then exploding with the back hip sort of towards contact instead of like that mindset, instead of more like left hit or front leg dominant where it's like sort of off the ball. And obviously I did something, this is a little weird, but I was doing yoga the other day, a quarantine. I don't normally do yoga. But I was doing it, and it was like a hip, I don't know, it was focused on the hips. And one of the positions that like had you like engage the outside of your hip and like push, it was almost like outside of your hip pushing in.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anybody knows warrior pose.
Yep.
So like your front foot is pointing forward, your back foot is pointing like at the plate, and you're pretty wide. And it's like essentially what like throwing position would be, or close to launch position. And like engaging the outside of your front hip, so like for a righty, your left hip. And then whenever I was just messing around and started doing like swings with it, and I could start feeling like a stretch more in my side than I normally feel. And so I don't know exactly. It kept me from rotating off the ball with my hips, and it kept it sort of back hip going in the right direction, not rotating off the baseball. I don't know what to do with that information really, but it was cool.
Yeah.
So you guys are doing yoga in the fall for sure.
Yeah. I don't want to
6 a.m.
I don't want to put him out there and give him credit, but a rival of ours, I thought, we saw him this year early on. Every ball they took, if they didn't swing at it, their back hip was starting, right? So they kind of had that mindset of no matter where the pitch is, no matter, if we're swinging or not.
You can tell us who it is. I mean, we got A&T and Bethune-Cookman on the same
This
video.
This is me at glove.
I know, but still, I don't want to throw them out there and give them props. So, they kind of felt, I really enjoyed watching them hit and watch their hitters, because to me, they just looked aggressive, right? They took aggressive takes. And, it was like, as a pitcher, I would have been like, man, I don't want to throw the ball anywhere near the strike zone for these guys,
Yeah, no, I definitely understand, man. I think if I needed to pick my top 3 words that I use most in one day with our guys, is our back hip. Yeah. I preach back hip all day long. I think they get annoyed with the amount of times I say back hip to the ball, or engage with it, use it, burn it, everything. Because I think it's like you said, Tyler, trying to get into that mindset where we're rotating into the baseball instead of just using our arms. And it's been a challenge, but I think definitely we started to see results. And I think back hip is obviously not the first thing you should engage in your swing. I think because right energy, I think, comes from the ground. And we want to use that ground force into our knee, into our back hip, and then into the baseball. But definitely back hip is probably top 3 in the list.
Yeah. Don, anything you want to add to that?
I agree. No, I think I love that I love that cue. I used to use that cue. I use it with my hitters. A lot of guys. It works for a lot of guys. I, back hit, man. Yeah. You guys took it. Yeah, took the words, man.
Just all right. So going into the swing, and moving forward, for me, I always like to reference the Nike check mark. Now it always depends, and it's always different. The higher the pitch, I think, and I always tell our hitters, think of your shoulders. So the higher the pitch, the flatter your shoulders are going to end. Middle, you're going to have a little shoulder bent, and that's going to be kind of that perfect Nike check mark. And then the lower the pitch, you're going to have to get your back shoulder underneath the baseball. And that's kind of the cues I use to kind of teach the swing plane. And no matter what, you're swinging across your chest. Even on the high pitch, you're swinging across your chest. Middle pitch, you're still swinging across your chest. So I guess I'm just saying, think about your shoulders for your swing plane. I have a couple pictures here. Let me show you. Of Christian Yelich. He's got a high pitch here on the right and that middle pitch, and you can kind of see the shoulders are a little different. The higher pitch are a little bit more level compared to the middle pitch where there's a little bit more tilt. And if I had a low pitch, there'd even be even more tilt. Yeah. So what about you guys? What do you guys use to kind of teach the swing plane and the swing itself?
Who wants to go?
We should let Don, right?
Don needs to go first.
All right. So as far as swing, a lot of the times the player could kind of coach himself. You gotta get him to watch like the flight of the ball. I think that's gonna tell us a lot about where his swing is at. Like it's pretty easy. You see guys taking BP and you see a guy rolling over a ball to left field, a right-handed hitter. Mm-hmm. You see top spin, or you'll get like the lefty and he'll slice balls to the opposite field, vice versa. I think from there you kind of assess where he's at with his bat path and get kind of like a overview. So like as far as the swing path, I like the Nike swoosh. I think that's pretty ideal. You want it you want to get on plane with the ball, but I don't think you want to get on plane like super back here. I think you want to like kind of gradually get on plane. You want to keep that one thing that I was talking to Stefan about it a couple of months ago. I wish I knew this as well. Learning a lot of stuff lately, but keeping that wrist hinge. I think if you hold that angle right there, like with your wrist, I think that helps you get into the zone a little bit better and get that playing well without sacrificing getting the barrel dumpy and sweeping it across the zone.
Sure.
I think that's one big thing that like I feel like guys are like either on one end or the other end, but I think that's like a good kind of like medium where you can get it on plane with the ball behind it, but you're not getting on plane so early that you're gonna hook the ball or you're gonna miss under it. So I think on high pitches, like for high pitches, you might want to get down more. Just the way the ball rides, especially you're facing a guy with high spin rate, you want to get on top of the ball and it's gonna get that flatter path. A lower pitch, you're gonna want to tilt a little more. You're gonna have replace the forward bend with a side bend.
Yeah.
So
I think the same thing. I think honestly, it's all gonna depend on pitch location. That Tyler and you both said. One thing that I think we try and focus on is that to get on playing with the baseball, right? Sometimes your hands don't need to do as much. What I'm trying to say is sometimes when we attack the baseball, our ribs are gonna, I think, naturally collapse. Our right here, our this part of our body is gonna collapse, and obviously it's up to us if we collapse it, and then that allows us to get on playing with a baseball if we have a good hand path. And obviously if we don't have a good hand path and we collapse, that's where the inconsistency of the barrel is going to come. So we try to tell our guys, get on playing with the baseball. And if you do have already established a good hand path, working on your drills and with the tee and stuff like that, all you need to do is collapse with your back rib, and that's going to you know, that's going to allow you to get on playing with the baseball naturally. So that's a cue that might work with, you know, with a few hitters. I don't think it works with every hitter. Like Stefan was saying, you know, it's very individualized. But that's one thing that, you know, I've noticed this year that it did work with a few of our hitters. So we definitely, you know, allowed them to think that way, because, you know, every hitter thinks different. Every hitter understands different terms. But that's one thing, you know, and another, I think, verbal cues that we use and that I use with them is, you know, stay tight and stay connected when we're attacking the baseball. And then another one, which is probably my favorite, I learned it a few years ago when I was playing, is palm up, palm down. You know, when we are at contact, you know, one palm is facing up, one palm is facing down, and we want to keep it that way for as long as possible, because that's going to cause, you know, good extension, good backspin, good follow through the zone. So, you know, that those two cues verbally, verbal cues we use a lot. You know, stay short to the zone, long through the zone. So stuff like that, and as a matter of a swing is a concern. But
yeah, swing path. Yeah, in terms of we use all, like, we tell them to do stuff as well with their body, but in terms of other ideas that we've used to try to get out of their body, it's just like try to hit a home run to center field. Generally speaking, you can't do that if your swing path is really steep negative or really steep up. If you're going to hit a home run to center field, you're going to have to get behind the baseball and through the baseball for a long period of time, because you're hitting it to the biggest part of the field. So that's on top of the stuff that you were talking about, just cues like that aren't really body related. So I'm not telling them, hey, do this with your hands, hey, do this with your feet, whatever it is. Do this one with your shoulders, because we use those as well, but sometimes it gets them all yipped up. But whether it's a home run to center field, sometimes if they're cutting across the baseball to the pull side, we need to tell them, hey, try to drive it, whatever you can, hit it over the right center field fence. So that's
for sure.
Obviously the Nike check is ideal. I think
and
what you're saying,
I'll go ahead
with the
and
shoulders.
ask you guys something. If this is, I guess, a general question, I just want to get your you know, your opinion on this. You guys, you know, with obviously over there and A&T and at Stetson, you know, staying behind the baseball. You know, I tell our guys, stay behind the baseball. You know, see the barrel hit the ball.
Yeah.
You know, stay behind it. But I don't know if you guys use that term or like that term.
Yeah, for sure. We say get behind it, and the thing that I sort of ran into issues with at first, whenever I first started saying that, is guys never couldn't. We would say, like, stay behind the baseball. Hey, stay behind the baseball, stay behind the baseball. But they were never getting behind the baseball, so they couldn't stay there. So yeah, we use that. You get your eyes behind it, get your barrel behind it, get different things behind the baseball.
Yeah. So one thing I was actually going to mention there, and I was going to go back to it, but I'm glad you mentioned it, Jose, was I tell guys we swing to get back. Right. I think some of the best hitters in the game, as you can tell here with Yelich at contact, you hear Joe Smo, coach, always say, catch the ball out in front. I want us to catch the ball in front, but a cheat for that is getting back. If we turn and get back, every pitch we hit, every ball we make contact with becomes out in front. So it's a race to see how deep we can let the ball get, but still get out in front. Right. So a cue I always use with especially young hitters is get back, you know, swing, get back to hit. You see a lot of young guys, they swing and they finish with their chest over their front side. So I always say, you know, let's finish. We want to hit into a firm front side, which if we get our chest back to hit, you see guys automatically, it's you know, it's like magic. It creates that firm front side for them. I don't know if you guys use anything like that or talk about that, but I always tell young hitters especially, swing and get back, right? You turn and get back. And it, you know, because they always would say, yeah, my coach always tells me hit the ball up front, hit the ball up front. And I always see kids start reaching for it and get into a bad posture.
Yeah, I think reaching for it and getting jumpy whenever you start saying too many of those things is a pretty common problem when it comes to hitting the ball up front. Now, nobody's arguing, like you're saying, obviously, like those pictures of Yelich, he's hitting the ball out in front, technically, of his body.
Yeah.
Now, like if you just told player A to hit the ball out in front, out in front, out in front, I don't know if he's getting into that position.
Yeah.
But you can tell, like they're – and whenever I look at those pictures of Yelich, it looks like he's trying to get everything behind the baseball at contact.
Bring it up for you, so you got talk on it.
So to me, that looks like he's almost like leaning back, like what you're talking about, Pack, like leaning back, trying to get everything behind the baseball, and then swinging through the pitch, not to one singular spot. Like he's swinging, like that goes back to bat path. So like you're not trying to hit one baseball. I've told you guys, like it's sort of that old school like tee drill where you put like 3 tees and you try to hit all 3 baseballs. You're trying to swing through each position or each baseball, not just that one in and out of the zone. So.
All right. Well, I mean, that's going to bring us kind of to our finish. I don't know how much you guys talk with hitters about finish. Something I do with our guys and younger guys is if we work backwards, right? If we work from our finish, and I give some guys some cues and kind of show them, what the finish looks like, it tends to clean stuff up moving, going backwards, right? So, some young guys I have to say squish the bug. Some guys I say get your back heel up, right? And that all is hoping to get in hopes that they turn to hit. Some guys I have to say, you're going to swing until your back gets to, your bat is getting to your back, right? Because some guys, they want to hit and they stop, or they don't finish all the way through, or like what you were talking about, Stefan, where they don't, they're trying to hit one ball in one spot and they're not trying to keep their bat path in the zone as long as possible. So those are some things that I mentioned in the finish. Is there anything you guys talk about? I know the finish is going to change depending on the pitch, but if we're, kind of working from the basics and moving on from there, is there anything you guys talk about from the finish standpoint?
Yeah, I think a big thing, like what you sort of already mentioned, it was actually finishing.
Yeah.
I think a big problem is a lot of people don't actually finish their swing. They get to contact and then it sort of stops there. You want to swing through contact and finish and let your swing actually finish. That's really the biggest thing that I talk about in terms of finishing the swing, because if you do everything else right leading up to that, hopefully your finish sort of takes care of itself. You just let the swing finish. You don't cut it off. Very few people are able to just really cut off the swing. The one that pops in my head is like Chase Utley. That sort of like he stopped his swing like it almost looked like right after contact.
Yeah.
But in general,
like one hand or two hand finish, and I'll let you guys answer that. Stefan, do you?
Yeah, like my preference would be one hand for sure. I think it allows you to sort of keep the bat in the zone longer. Now I'm not gonna make you do one or the other, but I've told guys that finish with two hands. I've told them to try out one hand finishes before just to see how it feels and what it does. And for the most part, it's allowed them to stay in the zone for longer. I would say, I don't know, like 90% of them. Yeah. There's a few that it doesn't necessarily.
Yeah. Don?
Yeah, I don't. Oh, wait, I'm going. Go ahead, man.
Oh, go ahead, Jose.
No, I know. I was gonna say the same thing. The same thing as Stefan. Kind of, I haven't had to tell, made it mandatory for hitter. You have to finish with two hands. You have to finish with one hand. I've personally, tried it in the cage. Hey, try this, see what happens. Or let's see what happens. Or for 4 rounds of BP, if you're finishing with one hand, you're staying longer through the zone. Just trying to experiment with one guy. But I don't have a preference. As long as you're staying through the zone like we want you to stay through the zone and getting good backspin on baseballs, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. The finish, a lot of it is style. Sometimes it could tell you about what happened in the swing though. You know, so a lot of times you could look at a finish and kind of see where some flaws may be earlier in the swing that led up to that. But as far as like the mechanics of it, I mean, everybody's gonna finish differently. You know, a lot of it is gonna be just style and the way pitch location is gonna dictate that as well.
Yeah,
So,
I think your finish can be like a cue, like finish high. Like if you can use that as something to get them on plane for longer. If you tell them, hey, if they're choppy, if they're super choppy, you want them to finish high, then that hopefully that'll get them on plane to finish high.
Yeah.
Now, if they're the opposite, if they're swinging really up, like too far up, then you say, hey, finish low right here.
Yeah.
And that sort of gets them out of the thought process, like I was talking about earlier, in terms of getting them. I'm not doing this with my hands and this with my feet and this with my hips and this with my shoulders. All they have to think is, hey, finish low, and that takes care of it. Now, that doesn't always take care of it. We've got a guy who we sort of told him to finish high, lefty, and instead of like flattening him out, it became just like a V essentially. His swing, so it was like one spot, boom. And if it was that one spot, I mean, he was really freaking good, but it wasn't that one spot very consistently.
Yeah.
But we got it fixed a little bit. Unfortunately, we finished the season, but he was doing well with it, and the fix ended up being from the beginning of the swing. We sort of told him to flatten his bat out at the beginning, and that way it helped him, like what we were talking about. It was a lot easier for him to get behind the baseball from a flatter barrel than it was from a vertical barrel, because it was already sort of preset.
So just a couple pictures that I had here. Griffey had the sweet, smooth finish, right, that we always reference for lefties, with the one hand, the bat finishing towards the back heel, and then Mookie here with the two-hand finish, and then Javi with his one-hand finish. I like to look at Mookie's and Javi's in the sense that you can see in these pictures, they finish back, right? We talked about that, the swing and getting back, and they both have different, right? They're finishing, one's with two hands, one with one hand, and Adon was talking about the individual and the preference. I agree 100%, right? Just depends on how each individual feels. And I really like what you mentioned, Adon, about you can tell if something went wrong earlier in the swing just by the finish, right? And I think I mentioned earlier about, the squish the bug or get the back heel of the sky. If that back foot's flat, rarely, especially for younger hitters, did they turn to hit, right? It was all pushy or handsy. And heck, you don't even need to watch their upper half. You can see that just from the lower half. Yeah. So when looking at the finish, I think there's a story to be told from the finish and just watching that.
Adon, or does anybody else have K-Vest accessibility? I know we don't.
No.
I would
like no.
Not a
So Adon, so like, can you? I thought it was a safe assumption. I just wanted to be sure. Whenever you're looking at it, I don't know how much you've used it yet, but I mean, with the season getting cut and everything, but can you tell like a flexibility difference using a K-Vest in terms of, like, I feel like Mookie Betts is an unbelievable flexible guy in terms of the swing. I don't know if he can touch his toes necessarily, but like in terms of like separation between hips and shoulders and able to, like, if my hips are really open but my shoulders are able to stay on the ball, then I can finish with two hands the whole way because nothing's come off the ball yet. Now, if it was just me standing there right now and my hips went and my shoulders went and I finished with two hands, it would be much more difficult for me to cover through the baseball.
You mean you're as athletic as Mookie Betts?
It used to be.
Yeah, so I mean, I could say I got to use it for a couple weeks.
Okay.
But so basically when you hit on it, it gives you a bunch of different sections of graphs. One of them is like the relationship between the torso and the pelvis, and there's one graph and it measures like the angle, like the separation between, they call it the X factor stretch. So like that kind of separation. And then it measures it at heel strike, at contact, and at first move, heel strike, and contact. So you can kind of see. So I mean, yeah, I'd be interested to see, Mookie Betts versus like a stiffer moving guy.
Yeah.
And
It's
seeing the
definitely
difference
up to one.
in those. tell Coach Hall to invest one for next year.
Yeah, I'll get it right on that.
One last thing I should mention there about the finish. Have you guys ever heard like you want to finish by not breaking your wrist, right?
Like the Arenado style.
Yeah, like the Arenado, right? He's the perfect example. Have you guys ever used that?
I've never used it personally.
Never.
I've thought about it before, but I've almost done it, and I probably will eventually. But just for a guy that we're trying to figure something out. But I think that's a very, very difficult thing to try to do, because I've done, like, normally, like, almost every single time I tell somebody to do something, I've sort of tried to do it myself, and just to see what it feels like and see what ends up happening. But like that thing is, in terms of a feel, I think it would be okay, and like on deck and stuff. I haven't used it for somebody to actually swing and hit a baseball, thinking with that thought process.
Yeah. What about you, Don? Have you used that?
So, yeah. So, I mean, talk to different guys about it. I think a lot. It depends on like how their swing is. So like if they're like a really tight mover and their swing is like really like like boom, like think Trout or Arenado, where it's just like a punch.
Yeah.
I think that might work better for those guys, because just the way like their swing gets to the zone. If you get more like a looser mover like Donaldson or like that, like Betts, maybe they're gonna get a little bit more of that turn. They're not gonna stay through as much.
Sure.
I think as long as they get through the hitting zone without breaking, I think they're fine.
Yep.
Personally, I was a huge breaker. That was one thing I tried to do my whole college career, is keep that palm up, palm down through long. I couldn't do it. I had it every day. I tried it. I couldn't do it. There's some guys that do it naturally.
Yeah.
But even just like looking at video of big leaguers, and we have access to a lot of high speed video. A lot of them, especially like the guys with like the really loose swings like that, they do break their wrist like after contact.
Yeah.
Like that.
Jose, what about you guys? Have you used that?
Man, we've never had. I've heard about it, from other coaches and other hitters that have mentioned it, but personally, I've never tried it. Maybe I will. Who knows?
Yeah.
I've never tried that.
I think we've sort of done it with like a top hand drill.
Yeah.
Like with just top hand.
For sure. Same with us.
But other than that, I haven't. Have you, Pack?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I always imagined like what you said was a field drill.
Yeah.
On deck, especially for guys that don't get through the baseball. If you think keep those wrists still and try to get extended, right? It's kind of a good feel.
You end up looking like Joey Votto on deck.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's a prime example of it. But no, okay. I mean, that's all I kind of want to cover tonight. I appreciate you guys getting on, and appreciate anyone that's going to listen in afterwards, and Coach Wam's down here sticking with us for the whole time. Again, thanks, guys. Thanks for joining. I'll try to post it up tonight and retweet it and try to get as many views as we possibly can, all right?
Yeah, appreciate
it,
guys.
man.
See you
Thanks,
guys.
Tyler,
for having us.
Appreciate you.
See ya.